Welcome to Sales Bytes by Journey, where we talk about everything you need to know to be a killer at sales. I'm your host, Will Jenkins. Let's get it.
Hello. Welcome to Sales Bytes by Journey. My name is Will Jenkins, and I'll be your host, CEO, and founder of Journey. Today, we have Mike Beckwith, VP of Brokerage at FreightPlus. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Man, so crazy enough, you just reminded me that we go super far back to the Coyote days.
Yeah, I was about to say, I probably met you 8-9 years ago whenever Access America got purchased by Coyote.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. It's crazy to think there are so many people that have gone through either of those organizations and are at the vice president level and building businesses and going to do a thing, man. A lot of talent coming through those two businesses over time.
Absolutely. It's awesome to see a lot of your colleagues going out and building better businesses out there. And it's been great to watch.
It's the best. It's a lot of fun, man. So, well, appreciate you being here today. As we go ahead and get started, I would love to just have you tell us like a quick 10,000 foot overview of your background before we dive into some of your sales topics.
Yeah. So, as you said earlier, I'm the vice president of Brokerage today, but, I think like most people in the industry, I got here by accident. I was serving tables and bartending at a local spot in Chattanooga, and had a beer with the right guy at the right time that was looking for someone that just had the right mindset, had the right hustle, and he was like, "You want a career in logistics? You ever thought about that?" And I remember going back to the back of the kitchen and asking Siri, Siri, what is logistics? Because I had no idea. I didn't go to school for it. I actually wound up dropping out of college after a couple of years, and got my first gig at Access America Transport, learning the ropes, learning cold calling and sales. It was a cradle to grave environment, and as you know, Coyote bought us about a year after my time there, and then it spiraled into UPS. And, by the time I left Coyote after a 7-year tenure, I was overseeing 3 or 4 offices, in the Southeast area. And, most recently I jumped to another company to help, as a director of sales, build up a Chattanooga branch, managing a few of their offices. And then my current stints, shipped up to Boston to help, FreightPlus, who's a managed trans provider, historically, that's been, growing like a bad weed, and they didn't have the brokerage services. They didn't have that transactional solution for their clients. And so, now today I'm over sales operations and client success for that division of the business.
Man, that's awesome. I got a chance to get a little bit acquainted with Steve a few months back, just learn a little bit more about FreightPlus. You all have a very unique offering. So it's cool to see what you're able to build out and the services that you all can provide. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. And, I think my favorite thing about the team is just how diverse the group is. Steve particularly comes from an Amazon background. And, as you know, from that behemoth of a company, they've got certain ways of doing things that help them grow tremendously. And so we're, seeing some of those practices brought in, just a fresh perspective on how to grow a business, mixed with a bunch of really great people from the freight industry now. I mean, it's one of the strongest leadership groups I've had the pleasure of working with. And it's been a really cool experience so far.
That's awesome, man. So as we get started here, I always love to start with a fun fact. So what you got for us? Yeah.
So this is a weird one for me, but, so as I said, I'm a college dropout, right? Went to University of Tennessee at Chattanooga for a couple of years, didn't really know what I was there for, and just wound up getting into the working world, in the food industry. And, my career's taken me a lot of places, but one of the weirdest ones that it has taken me is having that same university reach back out to me and ask me to be an instructor at their supply chain academy that they were building up for the local area. So yeah, it was, to not have a college degree, then to get to, teach at the same college I had dropped out of. That's probably one of my favorite fun facts, because you don't hear about that happening too often. I was really blessed to have that opportunity and get to do that. I had a natural calling to teaching. My grandfather was a professor at Clemson, so it was something I wanted to try out naturally. So, but that was a really cool experience to get to do that for a couple years.
All right. Awesome, Mike. Well, I'm excited to dive in here on Sales Bytes and talk about knowing the industry in and out. So becoming a student of the industry. You, sir, are certainly a student of the game. So put us on. How do we go ahead and become industry experts inside and out?
Yeah, I mean, there's not one source of truth. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing that's unique to our industry. I mean, even you look at, probably one of the most widely used tools, DAT, right? They have somewhere in the ballpark of 100 to 150 billion dollars worth of data running through their systems. But in reality, the U.S. domestic market has somewhere close to $450 to $500 billion in actual truckload movements taking place across the country, right? So, when we talk about being a student of the industry, it's being able to kind of put all the pieces together and really articulate what's happening in the market, right? Not to get back to like basic economics of high school, but it's a game of supply and demand. It really is, and obviously, we see weather events taking place. Those things are pretty obvious to everyone that are taking place. But to really inform a customer, to really become a student of the industry and being able to get to the point where you can then teach back to others, that takes some time and education. That takes kind of the daily dive. When we talk about, the prep for the day, one of the first things I always have my teams doing is digesting not only the external market, but the internal market. What does our team got to cover for the day? What does the country look like in terms of demand and supply? What are those regional, maybe it's seasonalities that we need to look out for? So really when it comes to being a student, I think there's a difference between a career and a job when it comes to this conversation too, right? If you're career focused, you're looking at logistics as a long-term career, you obviously want to get better here. You obviously want to be adding to your portfolio. You want to be just working on yourself through and through. And I think a big piece of that is not only like when you look at being a student, it's not just about doing the research. It's about knowing where to go for the research too a little bit. Like we luckily have nowadays, we didn't have this when I first started, but FreightWaves is out there pushing industry news. DAP's gotten a lot better about their insights page. And there's just, what I've loved to see about the industry is there's a lot of different companies giving their perspectives now of what's happening in the industry and really what's to expect. A lot of them are pushing out forecasts now. And that, you read as many of them as you can, right? Obviously, you don't want to spend the whole day doing it, but those little tidbits continue to really build upon your understanding of the market. And when you're having conversations with customers, you'll find a lot of these people don't really know what's going on, don't really get this information in front of them. So the more that you get to be a student is really, I guess the point there is you get to teach more at the end. And I think that's what the exciting part is when people finally start seeking you out for your advice because you might know something they don't.
Dude, that's so powerful because what you want to be able to do is be an advisor, a strategic consultant. As you look at what's going on in somebody's supply chain, it's really tough to do that if you're not knowledgeable of the market. I remember when I first started on the shipper side, spring of 2016, I'd never sold to shippers before. I had 8 green, brand new, level 1 customer sellers, fresh as a daisy, just ready to start slinging freight, right? Like I had never done it before. And so I did what you mentioned, like go ask some questions, I write down some stories. I need to learn how to be a manager of these people who've never done this. But I used to go and snip transport topics every day and send it out to the team in the morning and just give them a couple of articles, produce news, all these different things, because I felt the only way for me to gain some credibility with shippers was to just hammer information to know as much as I could. It's like sometimes the stuff wasn't valuable until months later. I remember being on a call with the customer and I'm like, man, that article I read 4 months ago, I can drop this little tidbit of info, but I think it's one of the best ways to be able to be up to speed. You never know when that stuff's valuable.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And you never know what your competition's up to either. I think that's you don't just research the market, research your customers, research your competition. I mean, it is, at least for me, I was absolutely fascinated by it. And when you get to meet people, you and I obviously had the pleasure of working with someone like Chris Pickett, who, I mean, just the godfather of the forecasting model, right? To get to really listen to his podcast him and Jason Miller go back with that Meat for Coffee podcast that we see on LinkedIn. Like, I love that kind of stuff nowadays because it's the broader topic I think everyone really cares about, right? It's not just, I think being a student of the industry really starts with the lingo. It starts with the equipment. It starts with the nuances of freight management. And then it becomes fun after that, because once you get the hang of that, you get to understand what are the macroeconomic drivers that are really driving some of these factors in our industry. And how do you prepare your customers for that? How do you work with your own teams to be able to prepare for, headwinds that are going to drive demand forward and tighten capacity in the future? So it's really fun when you get to start applying those learnings to your strategies, and you really get to do something really special once you put those two together, weaponizing your data, if you will.
Oh, yeah. Well, one of the things that's interesting is most companies have a treasure trove of information, and they don't know how to use it because they can't pull it out and use that information actionably. It's just like sitting in their TMS or in Excel, and like, man, if you understand how to rationalize this data, you can make better decisions proactively with what's going on. But that's a whole different aside. I have a question don't get me down the data rabbit hole because there's so much information. I have a question for you as a leader. So vice president of brokerage, leading the team, you've got sellers going out there doing their thing. How do you, as a leader, teach people to become a student of the game? So how do you help teach people? And then how do you encourage them to build up that student of the game mentality?
Yeah. I think at least for me, and I always come back to mindset as a leader, working on mindset. For me, it's finding genuine intrigue with what you're doing. Right. And so for me, when we're talking about being a student, when we're talking about teaching others to be a student, I try to grab their attention with something that might be something I think that the person really gravitates towards, right? You look at people like Freight Caviar, right? Pumping out, some of the more funny, humorous sides of the business, and loved what they've turned into from a newsletter standpoint, right? Like that newsletter is a great bite in the morning, comes in your inbox at 9 a.m., gives you a little bit of the, what's happening in the industry type stuff. And it's an easy way to get informed, but it's also an entertaining read at the same time, and a really engaging place. So I try to show them a way in the industry to get this information that's not your New York Journal, that's kind of a little bit of a dry context. Reading article after article can get really consuming. So, taking in different bites throughout the week. Maybe it's Dooner on what to truck. Maybe it's a little bit of Freight Caviar. Maybe you're subscribed to the Monday Morning Brew, or the Morning Brew. That one talks just not industry specific, but more about macroeconomics. So different ways to engage and stimulate the brain on ways that you find entertaining at the same time. Like nowadays there's tons of podcasts out there that are focused in on the industry. Definitely some characters out there that are definitely entertaining to listen to and listen to them commentate on things. And big personalities out there, find something that you find engaging and entertaining, and really chase that rabbit hole down. I mean, that's how it started for me. It was, I remember on Instagram following Freight Caviar and the memes that came through. And, luckily I had some great leadership that were invested in understanding the market on a deeper level. And so for me, it kind of all lined up at the same time, where it was, I just got fascinated by the industry. It was like, especially some of the memes you saw are like, whoa, that stuff happens. And then you go research and it's like, oh, wow, that happens a lot more than what's referenced out there. And then you get into, the other stuff that is affected in the industry. And it's just, you kind of start to just uncover a rock, and it's just like everything you learn, it's like the next thing's maybe that aha moment for you that really unlocks you as an individual, and maybe unlocks something for your business that your customer might find valuable.
Totally. You never know what might resonate. So it's helpful to have a lot of different pieces of information that you can reference. Shout out Christian and Paul, Freight Caviar, putting out just bangers of memes and good information, man. But that stuff's helpful. It's nice to be able to digest it, because sometimes it can be a little stuffy, right? You're like, this is a little boring. It's not easy to relate to. So it's good to have some options like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I want to just kind of wrap up here, kind of going through a little bit of the notes, and then let me know if there's anything that I missed or anything else that you want to add. I took a couple good notes here. So you mentioned there's a lot of good places to get information. So not one source of truth. There's a lot of places to be able to get info. You mentioned that basic economics are at the core of what we do. So just understanding supply and demand is important. This is huge. So digesting external and internal market data. So, man, you might hear that a particular market is soft, but maybe somebody on your team took a ton of freight out of that area, and that's going to impact your ability to source capacity. So the DAT or truck stop says, like, that's not really relevant for the way you're buying. So how do you use that information to your advantage? Knowing where to go to get info. So you mentioned Freight Waves, Freight Caviar, insights from different places, other organizations putting out market insights. You also mentioned loving to learn, because then you get to teach. And I think you typically learn more when you teach it, because you get to learn it twice or three times.
Right.
You pass out that information. And then finding genuine intrigue. So that was really cool, because I could just tell you care a lot about freight and learning and helping people, because you're like hyped up about just the process of learning. And that's a different space to be in. It's like, I get to learn this stuff, not like, shoot, I have to.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and especially when you look at, when you really get into the messy middle of the business, and especially with, obviously I'm at a smaller 3PL company today, getting a newer company, especially with newer reps, to understand that we are going to create, you kind of pointed on it earlier, there is a such thing as an internal market and an external market. So when you talk about being a student, you're going to read a lot of stuff from external sources. But to your point, if you're not reading your own data from your own TMS, if you're not learning, there might be a seller that, to your point, takes 20 loads out of a market that was soft, but now you just tightened it up for yourself. And so you take another load for a customer out of that same market, you're probably going to be met with some resistance from your carrier floor, or, even from your own phone lines trying to cover that same load. So, to me, it starts with that fascination, and just stems from really kind of wrapping your arms around the entire picture and getting that 30,000 foot view.
Man, drop in some gems, Mike. I really appreciate the time. Thank you for joining us here on Sales Bytes.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. See you, man.